All right. I believe we have the recording operating at this point. I will
Yes.
convene the Public Record Advisory Council. Today is June 2nd at 11 o'clock, according to my wrist watch. So, excuse me for that. Let me just quickly uh, get a little bit of want to bring up the agenda just so I can see what we're going to do here. And I think that we are at the point where we're going to have a review of the agenda and any changes, questions, comments on the agenda. Okay, doesn't sound like it. So next thing, we are. This is going to be a potentially a long meeting. We're going to get a lot of stuff in an hour and a half. So at this point, I'm going to go to the report of the bylaw subcommittee and council vote on adopting draft bylaws. Scott, you're up, and good morning to you.
Good morning, Mark. Good morning, members of the Records Advisory Council, colleagues, and anyone watching us in our audience today. Scott Stauffer, I served as the chair of the bylaw subcommittee, and for the last, well, it's kind of an odd. I was preparing myself for what I was going to say, and I was like, you know what? It's been almost half a year since we met. We kind of hammered out bylaws last fall, really. Looking back, we had 3 meetings, September, November, and January. And we felt by January that we were in such a good place that, and with the legislative session starting, that we probably didn't meet again. So the version of the bylaws that was presented to the council, posted online by Todd, is what the bylaw subcommittee kind of came to agreement on as of January. To my knowledge, there's been no further discussion or revisions to it since then. I think as bylaws go, it's a pretty standard document. Bylaws are meant to inform and guide the logistics of how the body meets and kind of answer some of those institutional questions. We started off, if you remember a year ago, we created a hiring practice for our public records advocate position. And we wanted to make sure that was a piece that was in place so that could also be included in these bylaws. And so it has been included in these bylaws. We cast as wide a net as we could last fall. We got other state agency examples. We got examples of bylaws from other levels of government. And quite honestly, the version that we used is one that I kind of cribbed from local government, since that's my bailiwick. And I think it does a pretty good job. It's 6 pages, plenty of text in all kinds of ways. It refers to the relevant ORS, the state laws, in terms of our terms and meeting schedule where appropriate. It refers to meetings. It talks about quorum and related matters, pretty standard stuff. Public comment taking, how we vote, the official record. That was a bit of a discussion in one of those meetings talking about the official record and related matters, but we got to a good place, I think, with language there. We talked about officers and the chair and vice chair and then council members. And then the duties of the public records advocate and deputy PRA are mentioned. Subcommittees are dealt with, interactions with other agencies. There's a paragraph on that. And the meeting expectations, and then there's some standard goals and amendment stuff. So Mark, Todd, anyone else who joined us in the bylaws committee, I think that was my overview. It's in the packet. If anybody has questions about specific passages, happy to entertain those. But I think once we get to that point, the motion is probably simply the person, whoever moves, to accept the bylaws as presented by the bylaws subcommittee, something to that effect. Mark, Todd, am I leaving anything out in that summary?
No, no, Scott, I think you covered it really well. I'll remind everyone, just for those that are really invested in that position, we did eliminate the secretary position, so it's no longer listed in the bylaws. Otherwise, no. Thanks, Scott.
Scott, it's been a while since I probably should have reviewed the bylaws. It's been a while. I wanted to. I believe that we had added one additional section, sort of last. I don't know if it was last minute, but since the time that the bylaws committee met, and now. Did we include a requirement to review Todd in that process? That was not included? I saw Todd shake his head in a negative fashion.
No, Mark, where we left off was because we weren't going to have a subsequent meeting of the subcommittee to go over the drafts again. Scott felt it would be better, not to speak for you, Scott, but based on our conversation, it would be better to work on these completed bylaws, the draft as a whole, and then have a council discussion about adding that section.
Okay, very good. I just wanted to make sure we didn't lose that review of the PRA sort of and get that ultimately enshrined if the council feels necessary to get that enshrined into the bylaws too. But I also know that we've been operating for many years without a bylaws, and so I'm very excited that we finally will hopefully have some after this meeting. So any other comments from members or questions at this time? And so, Scott, I gathered that I know that I was a member of that subcommittee, but I gather you feel that the bylaws are in place, in shape for adoption at this time?
I do, Mark, and I would suggest you bringing up that conversation we had via email. I think that's a good start for the bylaw subcommittee in the next few months to meet and consider that, and perhaps bring amended bylaws to the next council meeting. So yes, I believe they're in good shape. And you know, the great thing about bylaws is that they are wholly owned by this body. And if this body ever deigns to further revise it, we can do that without too much fanfare except being on an agenda. So yes, long way of saying yes, Mark.
Great. Are there any questions, comments from members of the council? Well, Scott and members, I would certainly entertain a motion for the bylaws to be adopted.
Move to have the bylaws adopted.
Thank you, Will. Is there a second, please?
Second.
I'm going to give it to Emily Todd. Haven't had Emily around for a little bit, so I'm going to let some new faces go in. I think this is just a vote by a voice vote. So all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? No opposition. Well, Scott, again, I want to thank you and the subcommittee on bylaws. It is now, as I said, January 2nd, 2025, and the PRAC now officially has some bylaws, thank goodness. So I feel a little bit more official now. So we've dispensed with number 2. Very good, Scott. Again, thank you so much for your work. And, you know, I know it's taken some time, but we're finally at at least halfway finish line on that. So thank you. So agenda item number 3, mandatory annual council best practices survey for members and its implications for oversight of the Office of the Public Records Advocate. Todd, I gather this is something that you're going to discuss today, or how do you want to address this particular agenda item?
Sure, happy to. Yeah, I actually meant to put my name there for that item number and just forgot. And this will lead into item number 4. It's all kind of connected. So I guess I'll just start by reminding the council that when our office as a state agency was developing key performance measures, which are required to go along with any budget ask, one KPM that I was told we have to do as a council is answer this annual service about like council best practices. Every council committee, commission, so forth is required to do. We haven't done it yet, so we will need to do so moving forward. I'll share those questions soon. As you will see, several of the questions relate to the council's oversight of its, I don't know what you'd call it, its connected state agency, because most councils that are part of a state agency have an oversight function. And of course, this council has already taken on its role of being the sole decision maker in appointing an advocate. We created that process. It's now part of our bylaws. This is another step that we are required to take. And before I show you the questions, I will say that based on the KPMs we created, the survey should be completed before each year's annual meeting. Our meeting is usually in November or December. And so, probably working with the chair and vice chair, we'll discuss times to send it out. But I was thinking maybe in like September. The goal is not necessarily 100% compliance with the questions, but rather 100% completion by council members. So in other words, if there's currently 12 of us, we need 12 set of responses to meet our goal of 100% completion of this survey. So whether you answer yes, no, I don't know, or not applicable to any of the questions, the goal is to still have you answer all the questions and get them in by the date that we set. So I could just go ahead and show the questions unless anyone has any questions so far about what I've said. All right, I'm gonna find the questions and then share my screen. No, I don't think I did that right. Hold on, stop sharing. Always takes me forever. Windows, sorry everyone. Okay, here we go. Now, as you may recall, there are 15 required questions. So this best practices survey now consists of 15 questions, and I'll go through them. And you'll see that, for instance, 6, 7, 8. Actually, looks like it's all related to oversight of our agency for the most part. For instance, executive director's performance expectations are current. Executive director receives annual performance feedback. The agency's mission and high-level goals are current and applicable, so on and so forth. So given that this is new to all of us, and so far the only thing the council has instituted in terms of oversight of my office is the Director 360 every 4 years, we're clearly going to have to come up with a process for doing an annual executive director review, which is the council's annual review of the public records advocate. And we'll have to decide, does that mean it's just the chair and the vice chair, or the full council that wants to perform this review annually? I'll scroll down just so you can see the remainder of the questions. And then you see there are council specific questions like 10, the board is appropriately accounting for resources. 12, board members act in accordance with their roles as public representatives. 13, the board coordinates with others where responsibilities and interests overlap. 14, the board members identify and attend appropriate training sessions. So these questions, because they have to be answered, may force us to think about our practices and procedures and if there's things we want to do differently, but nevertheless, these are the questions we have to answer every year. So I'll stop sharing unless anyone wants to keep seeing the questions. These are posted also on the Prax page, and I could drop a link. Mark.
Yes, sorry. Somebody was calling me right in the middle of that. Todd, on some of those questions, can we, is an appropriate response not applicable?
Yes, because
Okay.
that's the thing. These are the 15 questions we have to answer. And so, right. Yeah.
Okay. And not applicable is a perfectly fine answer, I gather then.
I would believe so. Not all, this is a one size fits all solution, but of course,
Right.
not all boards, councils, commissions, et cetera, are the same.
Will do. Okay,
Yes.
Understand.
So let me see. So, right. So that's agenda item number 3. These are the questions we have to answer. There are obvious implications for oversight of my office. And so, Mark, I'll pass it back to you for agenda item 4, which I believe this leads into, and we'll direct it.
All right, well then discussion, item number 4, discussion and vote about adding a standing annual public records advocate evaluation biennial council report subcommittee. So Todd, I believe what we need to do is put together a review council to review your outstanding work. How do you want to go about this?
Well, yeah, I would say, well, one, if Scott's up for it, I think the bylaws subcommittee would be a good place for this to go to, especially if we're going to be adding a new subsection of the bylaws related to an annual review, including creating a process that the council wants.
Yeah.
And then, of course, that work will also be ongoing because we have our biennial report to do every 2 years. It's often sort of a last minute thing for us, and it's better if we could build it out in advance in a subcommittee.
Agreed. So why don't we go in that direction? How do you
I'm
want
happy
to
to join any subcommittee. Sorry, Mark.
So let's Todd, why don't you make a recommendation here so that we sort of have the guidance as to where we're rowing here. I'm happy to make a motion in that direction, but how do you want to do this? You want the bylaw committee to be responsible for the evaluation? Is that sort of the direction you think we should be going?
Yes, as well as the biennial report planning, but I would love to hear from Scott before I sort of volunteer him for this work.
I think that's wholly appropriate. I mean, we're all in various levels of government, right? There's always an instinct to create another subcommittee or task force, but controlling that, containing that, because one of the things that the bylaw subcommittee had to discuss is we had 2 tasks to get through, and we've kind of done that. We created a process for hiring, and now we've got bylaws. So its workload is somewhat lighter now that those 2 things are off. And then we already were planning and talking about adding this process to the bylaws. And so at least for the first go, we'll see how it goes. I have no objection to the bylaw subcommittee taking that on.
Will.
Thank you. I don't want to add work, but I like having these types of processes at least sketched out and the inputs described. I think it's helpful. I think Todd's position gets exposed to a lot of things, administrative and political, and so it's helpful to have, in my experience, the criteria and the process at least sketched out so that the bylaw committee would have that to work from, and so we're not reinventing the wheel each time. So I would propose developing at least a draft and figuring out what's the right way for us to do that to ensure transparency and a good process as our outcome.
Thanks, Will. Steve.
Yeah, Scott, I appreciate your taking on this extra work. And I'm wondering whether it's the anticipation that the annual review will be performed solely by the committee, or will there be some medium for input from the full council?
And I think that's something that we, again, should frame out and sketch out in the process. I think that, again, the history of the Public Records Advisory Council and advocate shows that at different times, different inputs have been more and less important. And so if we provide, I think, an ability to have that kind of input, sort of similar to the kind of input that, say, larger public bodies have around the budget process, that when we're subjected to the Tax Supervision and Conservation Commission, I think there's a real benefit and again, greater transparency in providing that kind of an additional process and input.
My initial thought, just Steve, my thought was, I think the whole council has to be involved in it, and I would see this subcommittee as more facilitators.
Todd.
Yeah, one idea could be for the subcommittee to explore different forms of annual reviews and present them to the full council for the full council to vote. For instance, we could take a minimalist view. The annual review consists only of answering questions that allow us to answer questions in the survey. Or it could be a maximalist approach. What do standard annual reviews look like? And do we want to go down that route? I've had annual reviews pretty much my entire career before this position. They've been 2-minute conversations. They've been hour-long interviews. So it really just depends on what this council wants to do, including, again, does the chair just do it or does the whole council do it, so on and so forth. So we could either, or maybe you guys can decide that today and give us our marching orders in the subcommittee, or the subcommittee could come up with options to present back to the full council on this.
Shasta?
I think it would, yeah, I think it would be good to balance, kind of the, more work for the council with, a need for input across the council. So I think having a subcommittee is a good idea to kind of facilitate that process and make sure all the boxes are checked and everything. But I thought that the 360 process worked well, that everybody could answer the questions in kind of a survey format. And so would that continue to happen every 4 years, or could we make this annual thing like that in some way? But not have it be so comprehensive.
Yeah. I first of all, I trust the bylaw subcommittee to bring proposal to the full council. Being a member of the bylaw committee, I can say that with some confidence. But I do think that perhaps, well, I do believe that we should provide an opportunity for any member of the council to provide input if they so feel compelled to do so. I don't want it to be exclusionary. I do feel that everybody ought to be able to provide input, recommendations, suggestions. So my feeling on that is that I would prefer that the review allow for the opportunity for members to provide input, but I also have confidence in the bylaw committee presenting something that is thorough, comprehensive, and exceeds adequacy, shall we say. So I guess the next step would be, I don't know if we need to make a motion or anything, but I do think that we need to assign this next task to the bylaw committee. I suspect there's no opposition to that, and I don't think we need to make a formal motion or anything to that effect. Scott?
Mark, didn't mean to cut you off if you were in a sentence, but I am agreeing with what you were saying. And I had a logistical request if we could review the membership of the bylaws subcommittee real quick before we hop off, if this is the appropriate moment, or just because we're renewing the committee's workload, and it'd be good just to confirm who is and who maybe if anyone wants to join. Would that be appropriate?
I don't see why not. Todd, do you have our list of bylaw committee members? I knew that was gonna. Scott,
I could go.
That you do, because you're the
do.
one who has the
Yeah.
email list, right?
I was going to say I can unearth an old email, or we could just self-identify. I'm one.
I have a list from January of 2024 that I think is a decent starting point. I have Andrea Chiapella, Mark, Scott, Todd, Representative Anderson, Emily Gothard, and Yu Feng. That's the list I have. Anybody want to add or remove?
I thought I was on the bylaws subcommittee too.
Well, you are now, Will.
Yep. Welcome. Yep. Anybody else? Anything else?
Perfect. Scott, what I'd like to do, I don't know what your timeline is on this, but if you could perhaps between you and Todd put out a doodle or what have you. Let's do this for after the session concludes. So session constitutionally concludes June 29. So anytime after that, although I'll confess on June 30th, I'm going to disappear for a week at least, not to be reached. So you can certainly meet without me, but just so you know, I think that after the second week of July, target July, early August to get this thing rolling, if that makes sense. Do you think that the timing on that is okay? When do we, I guess, do we have a timeline as to when we want to get that completed, folks? Because we're going to have to, Todd, let me ask you this. When do we have to have that review completed? Is it by December-ish? Was that the timeline?
Well, we actually don't have to report out on the annual survey we have to do till next spring, but as just part of the KPM construction, we linked it to the annual meeting because that seemed most convenient. So if we want a performance review of the advocate before that, we're thinking what, September, October, even early November, so that it could be reported out and then the council can fill out the survey.
Yeah, let's try to sequence it in that fashion, just so that we're I always like to be a little bit ahead of schedule if possible, if at all possible. Great. Okay. Any follow up on that, Todd or Scott? Do we need anything at this point? We don't need any motions. We sort of put this in play. We know who the players are. Let's get a doodle poll out and we'll dive into that next work product. So great. All right. So it sounds like we've completed agenda items 1 through 4. Agenda item number 5, legislative update. Todd was kind enough to assign me that responsibility. Thank you, Todd. As you folks know, Senate Bill 1077 was introduced by Senator Thatcher as a potential vehicle for the PRACs. Let's see. It's not the PRAC bill, actually. It was a work group bill that was the product aftermath, I guess, of the PRAC bill in 2013. I mean, we're going back. Todd reminded me that I think we began this process in late 2021. Todd, we've been at this for almost 4 years now, 4 years of our lives. And the product of that work group, Steve was involved, I know. I'm trying to look who else was actively involved in that work group. I know Todd was, Steve was, I was. I don't see anybody else here who actively participated in that work group. It was a work group, and I will try to mention some of the names who were there, but I will confess it's been a while. We had members from the media, John Bile, OPB, Nick Budnick, Steve Suo. Local government was myself, Jennifer Johnson from the city of Portland, Eric Minton from the city of Medford. I'm trying to remember. There were probably some more local government types for sure. We had the district attorneys, a gentleman named Brian Powell from Clackamas County. Steve, Todd, you guys want to help me out? I know we had the trial lawyers were a participant in the work group. The state, we had Cameron Miles with the governor's office who participated. Long story short is that we came up with another proposal that is now what is called the -1 amendment to Senate Bill 1077. That bill was scheduled for a hearing last week. Regrettably, the Senate Rules Committee was running late due to a long floor session. The bill, the committee was scheduled to convene at 1 o'clock that day. Regrettably, they convened at 1:55. So we lost 55 minutes of hearing time, and they simply weren't able to get to the bill. The bill has been rescheduled for a hearing. Boy, I didn't even look at what day that's going to be.
The 5th.
Okay, so it will be heard on the 5th. Thank you, Todd.
The 4th. Sorry, Mark, the 4th.
Let me see that.
It's the 4th at 1 p.m.
Oh, yeah, it is the 4th. Yes, it is. It's at the 4th, on the 4th at 1 p.m. before the Senate Rules Committee. That will be the first public hearing for this measure. I've seen bills go all the way through the process in shorter amount of time. However, I'm not sure whether or not this particular bill has been green lighted by leadership to move forward. It will get a public hearing, of course, on Wednesday. And I expect that there will be some robust discussion about it. One of the key things that I found very interesting that we did learn last week was that the Department of Justice is neutral on the bill. And that's really actually pretty important, folks, because we are in that particular amendment, we are shifting quite a bit of responsibility from district attorneys' offices to the Department of Justice, whereby the Department of Justice will be making determinations on whether or not public records should be released, and furthermore, whether or not individuals deserve fee waivers or substantial fee waivers based on public interest review. And furthermore, that review by the the Department of Justice are a de novo review. And so that is a little bit more comprehensive, if I understand correctly, than just a regular old review that the district attorneys would have been or have been, at least historically, responsible to conduct. I'm going to pause there briefly to see if there are any questions. However, I will note the bill will be heard for a public hearing Wednesday, barring any unforeseen scheduled delays or whatnot. Shasta.
Thanks for the overview. I was kind of lost on what this bill was. That's a good refresher. So I wondered.
I apologize. I didn't really get to the thrust of it. The amendment is to address the fee issue that we have been discussing for the last, I don't know, actually, we've been discussing it for about 7 years, but we actually put pen to paper in the 23 session with Senate Bill 417. So sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm just kind of reading through the -1 amendment right now. Do you think that there's going to be a fiscal on this, or?
Well, that's a very good question, Shasta. I think that there are a couple possibilities here. First of all, one might be able to argue that this is a revenue-raising proposal. That is important because if it is determined to be a fee-raising proposal, this bill would have to start in the House. Now, Legislative Council drafted it as a Senate bill, but nobody has actually formally asked whether or not this is a bill for raising fees. That may very well happen. Another issue that could come up with this bill is if it is a fee-raising measure, it would require a supermajority, I believe, in order to pass a 3/5 majority, right? That is one of the requirements on revenue-raising bills, okay? So that is another question that is out there. I don't have the answer because I don't think anybody has necessarily formally asked for that determination. It could very well happen. Beyond that, the next question becomes whether or not the bill would have a fiscal impact to the state, right? So if it were to have, I believe the threshold now is $50,000. If the bill would cost the state $50,000 or more to implement, then the bill would need to be run through the Ways and Means Committee. So there still are some very important questions that need to be asked about or determined on this bill. But again, the purpose for Wednesday's hearing is really to get the public's feedback and thoughts on the measure. So Shasta, very good question. Those are really important questions that ultimately need to be answered, but to my knowledge, have not been addressed at this point.
And that has to happen in the next 3 weeks or something, right?
Well, if the bill
it's
were,
gonna get
if
through.
the, yeah, if the bill was, if they intend to move it, they're going to have to address those questions. Yes.
Great. And then the other question that I had was, it looks like the open government impact statements from February, so that's not. But yeah, I always look at those and they're always say no impact, and it seems like if anything's going to have an impact, it would be that. So maybe they just have to redo it.
Well,
But
I would say, Shasta, that impact statement was probably conducted on the base bill, which is essentially a study bill rather than the amendment itself. So I hope that helps. I didn't look at, I can pull that up and actually probably answer that question for you without having to look, because we can look at the date of the amendment, which was 5/28. I think we can pretty positively say that that impact statement was based on the base bill rather than the amendment itself.
yeah, I think so too. I just don't know at what point they redo it, but
They,
maybe after the hearing.
yeah, if they were to plan on scheduling a work session, legislative fiscal, legislative revenue will do their work. I suspect that the analysis will be, well, it's required that the analysis be done on the actual amendment as well. Steve.
Yeah, I just wanted to elaborate a little bit further on the evolution of the bill. That the PRAC reached a consensus on Senate Bill 417 back in 2022, and there have been several changes. But that was the baseline that the work group was negotiating from, which was already a negotiated version. But some of the important changes to mention, and these relate to the fiscal and the revenue, that were not in our discussions within the PRAC. One is as Mark mentioned, the movement of the appeals decision making from district attorneys to the Attorney General's office. So, from a statewide standpoint, you're moving from 36 attorneys, part or full-time, mostly part-time, around the state handling appeals, to a handful of attorneys in the Attorney General's office. This was something that the District Attorneys Association felt was important. And there's a good argument for specialization and one core group of people statewide handling appeals. And the other another item that I don't believe we touched directly on commercial requesters in the original bill, but there was a decision made to carve out for commercial requesters the ability for public bodies to impose up to 500% of actual costs, whereas everyone else would pay up to actual costs. And that revenue raising, the belief is, at least my understanding is that because these added fee collections will pay for other public records activities, that on the whole, it's not a revenue increase. It's actual costs on average for all public records requests being paid for by requesters, and some requesters being, if they're commercial, will pay more, and that should go a ways both toward providing fee waivers and also to some degree paying for the added costs in the Attorney General's office, if there is any. And there were some other tweaks to the public interest test, but the basic framework that we developed as a group originally is still there. There is a public body shall grant a fee waiver if it's in the public interest, and then the test for public interest includes factors such as the burden on the public body.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there were any other big substantive changes, Steve, but that was a really good summary, I think, of some of the big items that we had to get through to get to where we were, or where we are, I should say, excuse me. Any other questions on this topic or any comments at this time? Well, so we'll see how the hearing goes on Wednesday, folks. But I would say again that the Attorney General's office going neutral on this was a pretty big surprise. I do want, well, I think it was a welcome surprise. I do want to qualify though that Multnomah County chose not to have their appeals taken by the Department of Justice. So actually it would be 35 of the 36 counties that would go to the Department of Justice, and Multnomah County would retain that authority. Brent.
Mark, I just wanted to ask, why do you think the Department of Justice neutrality statement is a welcome surprise?
I frankly thought that, personally, I thought, Brent, that they would oppose it. I thought that, and okay, just from my experience, it would be an added cost and frankly burden to the department that is frankly got a lot of other things on its plate with our friends at the federal government. So personally, I was a little bit skeptical, if you will, as to whether or not they would want to take on this new responsibility. And that's why I was a little bit surprised. I hope that satisfies your question, but I frankly was a little skeptical that they would want to take on this new added work, considering everything that is happening at the federal level.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. I just appreciate it. I just wanted to understand your thinking on that. So yeah, thanks for sharing. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Shasta.
Yeah, so two thoughts around the proposed language, and I'm not sure where it goes at this point. Sounds like it's in the hand of the legislature, but I have long felt that actual costs, including attorney's fees, is kind of a way to manipulate the cost upward. So I would love to see language on when it's appropriate to have attorney's fees be included in actual cost. And secondly, the AI revolution is coming faster than any of us want to reckon with. And so having some clear language around AI use cases and whether they're commercial requesters or not, and kind of requiring AI developers to disclose their use of public records if they are, and just kind of making sure that the public interest is served when that happens. So those are kind of my thoughts on the legislation, but I can also just submit that in testimony or something at this point.
Well, first of all, Shasta, I didn't understand half of what you just said, but I'm a technological troglodyte, so that's probably not terribly surprising. But yeah, I think that if you have suggestions, recommendations, concerns, obviously the public hearing is the venue where that should be addressed. So if you have feelings about the language, I would certainly recommend that you get that submitted into the record. Just for everybody's understanding, you can submit testimony into the public record exactly up to 48 hours after the hearing begins. I want to make sure that I get that right. Not when it ends, but rather when it begins. So Shasta, you would have until 1 o'clock Friday to get that submitted into the record to ensure that it is included in the record. Steve.
Yeah, there is one important component of the bill that I believe originated with us, which is the opportunity for a requester to ask for an explanation of a fee estimate. And then the public body has to provide it within a certain time frame.
5 days.
And I think that will go a long way toward being able to come up with realistic numbers. The other thing I wanted to mention briefly, when the PRAC came up with its compromise saying, if it's in the public interest, then a fee waiver shall be granted, waiver or substantial reduction. We did not at that time define what substantial would be. And now this bill provides a floor of 2 hours of free labor. Now that's all conditional, again, on the public body deciding that it is in the public interest. And if they reach that determination, then they have to give 2 hours free. And that's just a starting point. It can be, you can make the point that the public interest is so great that it should be a full fee waiver if it's more than 2 hours. But I think that's really important for the kind of routine requests that may cost $75 or $100 that and amounts for that would pose an insurmountable obstacle for a lot of ordinary folks. So I think that was an important improvement.
Yeah, if I could just tag along, Steve, one of the other things that I think is actually really helpful is that the proposal provides guidance as to how to determine what is and is not in the public interest. And that, to me, I think may be one of the most useful components, at least for the public bodies, in determining what is or is not in the public interest. So there's certainly some commendable parts to this bill. I don't know how everybody's going to come out on it, but nevertheless, we'll learn more Wednesday. Anything else on this topic? Well, I do want to acknowledge both Todd and Steve for enduring through this. Steve and Todd both have been at this for as long as I have. It's been a lot of work. It's been a lot of teeth gnashing, I suppose. But we do have a product that we can finally talk about, and I think that will be helpful. So thanks again to both of you for working on that. I know it's been a long, long road. So anything else on this topic? All right, we've beaten that one pretty good. I'm just trying to get to my agenda here, folks. Forgive me. We're on agenda item number 6, I believe, which is planning the PRAC survey of public bodies. Shasta, first of all, just a little, I want to set this up a little bit. Back in prior to Todd, actually the original public records advocate, Todd, remind me her name again.
Ginger McCall.
Ginger, thank you. Back when Ginger was the advocate, we actually conducted a survey, which was one of the responsibilities of the PRAC, and we haven't done it for quite some time. Shasta, Todd, and I were in a meeting and believed that we raised this lack of a survey, having done a survey since 2019. And we thought that it is well past time for us to actually conduct another survey and try to actually get it regularized. So Having said that, Shasta was very eager to take this on. And first of all, thank you for that, Shasta. I'm going to hand this over to Shasta because she's the leader on the upcoming survey that I hope we can get completed this year, right, Shasta?
Yeah, I don't think there's any reason why we couldn't. So we decided to set this up as a Google form, just to make it, that seems like the easiest way to go about across all of these different public bodies. I'm trying to change my verbiage per Todd that they're not all agencies. Some of them are public bodies. So there's basically 6 sections. This is what it looks like on my end, but
Hey, Shasta, I'm sorry
Yeah.
for interrupting, but for those of us who are a bit older with not great eyes, is there any chance that you can enlarge now I can see it. Thank you very much.
Yep, no problem. So we would, if the council approves it, we would send this out. I think, Todd, did you say the last one was sent out to some 200 agencies or something? So
Something
a
like
lot.
that, yeah.
Yeah. I can kind of take us through. I don't want to take a ton of time, but if people want to read it, the kind of PDF form is on the website, and you can take a look at that. So this is just kind of explaining what we're doing here. I was hoping that if there are any public body members on this board, and I believe there are, if anyone wants to volunteer to take it for their public body, then we could have a good estimate on how long it does take to do. Because we're hoping that it won't take too long, but I think it would probably be good to know exactly how long it takes. Andrea? Are you
Sorry, all
volunteering?
the buttons to push. Yes, actually, we can volunteer for that. We got a new system last July that we implemented that is super helpful in like tracking, and we can pull reports super easily. So that'll be helpful. The one note I wanted to make was in Google Forms, I know that we are, as state agencies, we're like less encouraged to use those types of tools. We're kind of a Microsoft only type of group. So I don't know if that, I was asking my team here to see if like, can we fill out Microsoft or Google Forms without a Google account? I don't know yet. So that may be something to note.
Yeah, I know
Or
that
if you could
can.
make it anonymous or something, like without having somebody required to sign up for an account. I'm not sure however that works.
Right. So if you're an editor of a Google thing, then you would have to have a Gmail account. But if you're just taking the form, you don't have to.
Okay.
So this would, on the survey taker side of things, it would just say section, and then you would fill it in. And there's a setting where you can require that people put in their email address. And I think that was another piece of feedback that we wanted from the council is, which of these questions should be mandatory and which are okay to not be. Because it is pretty comprehensive. So so the first section is general information, just kind of who are you, what public body do you represent, and what are they like? And we tried to make as much as possible like easy click buttons. We turned a lot of the short answer texts into like whole number only fields, so that we can just kind of get consistency across the survey takers, so that we can have data at the end that all kind of aligns up and matches in a way that we can interpret. Scott?
Thank you, Shasta. I'd be happy to take it as a city. But also on question 3, and I don't know if you wanted feedback on the wording of questions. Question 3 in section 1, do you want the approximate number of FTEs the agency has in all, or just FTEs working on records? Or do we want to differentiate? At all? Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, we're just trying to get a sense of like, are you a teeny tiny agency or are you a big agency? Yeah, so the next section is more about like how many requests you get and how quickly are you able to get them out. And then, we tried to kind of turn this into like choose 3 max of your why. It might take longer than 5 business days, just so we can start to identify some of those common issues. And then a lot of these are just numbers. Yes, Mark?
A little trouble with my mute button there. Forgive me. One of the things that we've always talked about, and I do think this is an important question to pose to the public bodies, Shasta, is whether or not you have a policy on public records, right?
That's
This is
the
some.
next section. You're getting
Oh,
ahead.
never mind. I knew you had anticipated this. Good. I'm glad you did. I'll shut up now. Very good.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so more kind of like why, if you couldn't get it out in 15 days. And then there is on some of these in other fields. So if these, answers don't meet your needs, you can also just fill that in. It'll be a text box. So redaction, appeals, lawsuits, and the involvement of the public records advocate. Then this is our section on policies and best practices. So do you have a public records policy? And then we thought this would be really cool if at the end of the survey, we have like a whole list of links of the public records policies for folks. So we changed this to be, just provide the link if you have it, or write no if you don't. Andrea?
There's a statewide policy that is in need of some brief updates. And agencies each should have their own policy. But can you scroll back up just a bit? There was something that lawsuits. I was like, there's something that triggered lawsuits. So that may be difficult to research because I don't know, like it depends. I think that question may cause some extra homework, I suppose, is a good way to put that. But
Okay.
and maybe mostly a DAS question. I'm not sure though, so may want to chat about that.
So do you think that like the public records custodians would not be aware of
Not
lawsuits
necessarily, no.
No?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can only speak to DAS. For us, it's an entirely different division. So
Okay.
If that helps.
Yes, I will think about how to reorder that question, or maybe if it's so I could change it so that it's not a whole number and then people could answer. I will figure that out later. Yes, Will.
So it should be relatively easy to research lawsuits brought in a given reporting period based on a simple search, because the lawsuits are filed in reference to a particular statute. So we might have sort of a back end side to this for interpreting survey data and then having our own diligence. And that could be an effective tool for identifying lawsuits. Harder on the appeal side, but when the lawsuits move forward, they're always referencing one particular statute and oftentimes a couple others that are very specific to public records litigation.
Okay, so you could look it up through the court system. Yeah. All right. Okay, so yeah, policies and best practices, and then just kind of asking them how are you doing this? How are you tracking? And if there's other common trackers that people know about, please let me know. Yes, Scott?
You probably want to list Laserfish on there. That's a really common one among cities.
Laserfish?
Laser FICHE. It's
All
ORMS.
one word?
Yeah, I like that. It's the biggest competitor for cities with ORMS.
Okay. Thank you. And then again, if you have a fee schedule, provide the link. Do you have a policy on fee waivers? Provide the link. And then do you have a policy on waiving fees without the requester asking for it, such as a member of the media? And then how many waivers or reductions were made in 2024? So that's combined total waivers and reductions. And how many were granted? How many times were fee waiver requests denied? What is the amount of fees collected from requesters in 2024? That was a question that was also on the one from 2019. That's why we included that there. Any other questions on section 4, section? I feel like these got numbered weird. Okay. Accessibility and engagement. So is your records officer's contact information easy to find? Is it clearly posted online? This is, what are ways that requesters are permitted to submit requests at your agency? Can you just email the public records officer? Do you have to fill out that kind of stuff? And support and training needs. So, kind of what's the culture in your public body? Do agency heads receive onboarding or regular training? Do staff receive regular training? And who gives the training? And then at the end are these 2 questions that are just kind of, long answer, like, what kind of challenges do you face and what kind of supports could you use? So that kind of gives people at the end of the survey to talk about anything that wasn't asked or that they feel like could help. Any other questions or any part that you want to see again?
Questions on this section. Was there conversation about doing this in a calendar year versus a fiscal year? Because I know that question comes up a lot with like reporting things. And also, I don't know last time this was done, what that was, if that was a calendar year or fiscal year. Also, don't know if it matters, just a question.
Yeah, my thought was it would be a calendar year, but I'm open to hearing from others.
I'm just asking selfishly because we implemented our system in July of last year. So half the data would be in the not new system.
What if we let the survey taker say what the reporting period was so that they can use whatever reporting period?
Well, I would want it to be uniform so that we can compare apples to apples. But if we're getting this out after July anyway, I don't see any reason for us not to say it's the 2024-25 fiscal year. And that would be easier, I think, for reporting on the budget numbers that we were asking for. I assume. Did I see another hand go up?
Doesn't look like it. So are there any questions for Shasta at this time? Why don't we talk, Shasta, perhaps about timing? I don't know if you had given that much thought. I know that you put a lot of work into putting the survey questions together. Timing, you want to talk about it?
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of coming to the council to see if this is okay for approval. We can, you know, I guess I would lean on Todd to say, what's your workload like, and could we get it out in July? And see if we can get answers back within a month. Is that a reasonable time frame?
July might be a little tough. I'm going to be gone for close to 2 weeks, and then we're
Okay.
also having the bylaws subcommittee. It's probably more like August.
August. Okay.
I think that August, September, probably more like September. And the reason why I say that, Shasta, maybe a little bit selfishly, but we'll be in the fire season. And I can tell you the predictions are not terribly positive right now. And so what I recall is that we randomly picked a whole bunch of local governments when we conducted the previous survey. I don't recall what the timing of that survey was, frankly, but I do know that if we can shoot more towards early fall, that might result in a better response just because of vacation, school, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think for us to get, and I realize that governments get public records requests at all times of the year, but at the same time, I think that we're likely to get a better response if we were to do it maybe in September. That's just me thinking out loud. Any thoughts on that, folks? And then I guess not only the timing aspect, but then the next question becomes, what's the workload that this would create? If we do 200 local governments or local and state governments, that's a pretty big workload. I'm going to just say that out loud now. My recollection was that when we did the survey in 2019, I think we maybe had about 40, didn't we? We certainly didn't do 200 local governments. Todd, go ahead.
We did well over 100.
We
were
did.
we're looking for geographic and numerical representation. I will say that I did the majority of that work as a deputy public records advocate, both drafting and sending out, as well as compiling the results. I don't know if any of you recall, but at the outset of talking about creating a survey this time, I made clear that that was a workload that my office could not take on, and that since this is the council survey, the work would have to be done by the council. Of course, I am a council member and will do my share. I'm happy to be a part of it, but this will be the council survey. So the council will have to collect and analyze results, and I will do a lot of that work with you, but I think the council needs to lead this effort.
Do you have the list, or I assume you emailed it out, the survey out? Do you have the list of governments that you did?
Yes. Actually, I think we're gonna have to do a little extra homework, because what I did was, based on the governments we chose, I found email addresses for either submitting public records requests or public records officers. It's interesting because one very large county in particular claimed they never got it, even though we sent it to their declared email addresses for receiving public records requests and other people within their agency. So perhaps this time we might need to put out some information ahead of time that a survey is coming, maybe even try to identify as many specific people within those public bodies as possible, so we know it's arriving at a real person, or otherwise talk about it somehow to make sure it's received better than maybe sort of the scattershot way it was done the first time, or just the straightforward way it was done the first time.
Yeah, I mean, if we're gonna wait all the way until September, I feel like I would at least want to let people know that it's coming.
I almost disagree with that, Shasta. And let me tell you why. Because one of the things we're trying to determine is responsiveness, right? And giving people a heads up that, hey, guess what? We're doing a survey. And part of that survey is testing your responsiveness and compliance with statute. So, watch your inbox. No, I think that this needs to be treated as a typical public records request. That's just my personal feeling. This is not an attempt to be a gotcha, but it is a test to see whether or not local governments are in compliance with the statutes. Now, we're not going to necessarily call people out individually saying you didn't get your response back on time, blah, 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 but it does give us a sense for local and state governments' compliance with the statute. And so I'm not sure personally that giving a heads up to people that a survey is coming that's in part designed to check people's responsiveness, giving them the heads up. Now, if others disagree, that's I certainly can be convinced otherwise, but I do think that this to some degree is also a test of the existing systems that are out there. So that's just my feeling, and that's how I kind of took the last survey as well, is are local governments and state governments compliant with responsive times that are baked into statute. And I saw that is it Cecily? Yep. No, you're still on mute. Still on mute.
Are you able to unmute, Cecily? No. Okay.
Why don't you, if you have a comment or a question, Cecily, why don't you type it into the chat? Hopefully that'll work. I see that. Mark, they wouldn't be bound by response time. It's not a public. Yeah, that's true. But we could, couldn't we? Todd, Steve just raised an interesting question. Was our last survey that we did in 2019 treated? Did we design it to be a public records request? We did not.
No, Mark, especially because we're asking questions. We're not asking for records. It's the only sort of statutory obligation here is that every public body in Oregon has a duty to comply with the PRAC's inquiries to the extent whatever confidentiality laws at issue aren't affected by that, but that's it. So this is wholly not a public records request simply because we're asking questions about their public records request practices. They have to answer us to the extent that they can, but there's no deadline. Maybe we want to update our statute. I don't know, but right now, no.
Okay, well, thank you for that clarification. I was just completely off base there. Never mind what I said earlier. Although I do think that at some point we may want to do maybe some public records requests in the form of maybe not a survey, but just to test people. Anyway, okay, so we've got the timing. Shasta, what next steps, if any, do we need? I assume that we need to identify the targets. I suspect we're going to want the 4 stools of local government. That would be school districts, special districts, cities, counties, obviously state government. Anybody else? Well, knowing that there are 950 districts, there's plenty of districts, cities, and counties. School districts, there are 192, I think. 141 cities. There are plenty of targets out there. All right, next steps. I guess we're going to need to, Shasta, what do you need from us in order to push this out? I mean, I guess those are the next steps we need to figure out. And
Yeah,
if the advocate's office really can't take this workload on, I don't know how we're going to go about identifying, who the targets will be.
Well, it would be great if Scott and Andrea, who volunteered, if you guys wouldn't mind taking the survey, and then maybe if you can advise on what questions should be mandatory, and then other questions maybe shouldn't be, and then that would be kind of a way to have this survey light thing, because I am sensitive to this being a lot of work, if not all the stuff is in the same place. But I also think it is something that's going to be very valuable, the answers of this. You know, I can just see, as a person who's interested in open government, like having a whole list of all the links of everybody's, I think it's going to really help us in the council's work kind of figure out the lay of the land of what's going on out there. So yeah, and then just figuring out if I can get the list from Todd of what the ones were last time, then I can start working on, you know, what would be the next step, and maybe when's our next council meeting? Maybe I can come to the council in the next time and say, here's who I'm thinking of sending it to, and see if I get your guys's okay, and then by September we can send it out.
Well, I have two hands up. I still have Cecily, who hasn't put anything in the chat yet. Are you?
She can unmute. Oh, but we can't
can we hear you now? No, we can't hear you. Cecily, why don't you sign out and just sign back in? Maybe that'll do the trick. I do see Todd's hand up. We'll take Todd.
Thanks. First of all, again, I'm happy to do my part, and I'm sure it'll, you know, I'm happy to be part of this. In fact, all the responses I think will come to me. I just want to work with others this time to make all of this happen. So I really appreciate Shasta's leadership on this, and obviously please keep including me. Stephanie Clark put a link in the chat to the former survey that lists the 110 public bodies that were contacted and responded, and the 40 some odd that did not respond to the request. So that'll show you, Shasta, who we reached out to in 2019. And obviously we don't know if we want to do the same ones this time, but it'll just show sort of what the spread was last time.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Shasta, I don't think we have a meeting scheduled at this time. However, I would be more than happy to convene a short meeting of the PRAC to get this thing approved by everybody, and sort of to execute the survey itself. So I'm happy to work with you and Todd to identify a time you think you're ready to maybe move on this, so that we can get the PRAC's sort of approval, if you will, to go forth and conduct the survey. Does that sort of address that question?
Yeah, sounds like August might be a good time frame.
Yeah, we could do probably a pretty quick meeting on that and get that done. I know that we have to have an end of year meeting. That'll probably be, as Todd mentioned previously, either November or December, at which time hopefully we'll have some results that we can share as well. So I think that the timing of August for a meeting, just to get this thing teed up and moved out, would be in order. All right. Are we good with this? I do note that there is some back and forth about the number of questions in the chat. You know, Shasta, you can perhaps review some of that and take into account some of the comments that have been taken in the chat. At this point, I think, have we covered this one now? I think we're at the draft PRA public records policy. Todd, advocates training and mediation update as well.
Yes. Thanks, Mark. Here, I'm going to drop a link to the draft survey in the chat there. Not survey, sorry. Draft Public Records Advocate, Public Records Advisory Council, Public Records Policy. The statute says that the Public Records Advocate is the custodian for the council's records as well. Therefore, this policy will apply to both entities. I'm not going to pull it up and take you through it. It's actually quite straightforward, follows the requirements of the law. The only sort of policy statement expansive section is where under fees, hold on, I will go to that section just so I can read it back to you. On page 4, under policy for policy for production, we do state that the Public Records Advocate endeavors to not charge fees for its costs to produce public records whenever possible. However, the advocate may exercise discretion to charge fees as noted if the request is voluminous, requiring substantial time. So to date, the handful of public records requests this office has gotten for either our records or those of the council, we have never charged fees. The goal is to not charge fees, but we are reserving the right to do so if necessary. Otherwise, the amounts mirror DAS's fee schedule to try to keep them minimal and not charge at, for instance, Yufeng's rate as the Deputy Public Records Advocate as the lowest paid person in the office capable of doing the work. We would charge a more minimal rate for things like clerical time if necessary, if we ever were going to charge fees. So I just recommend everyone read this through if you haven't already, and either just ask me questions now or follow up with me one-on-one if you have questions to avoid any public meetings concerns, or Mark, if you feel that we're in a place to do so, we could go ahead and vote on adopting this now.
Well, my preference, of course, is to get this policy into place. But I also don't want to rush the council into approving something that they may or may not have had an opportunity to read. So having said that, I would like to get a sense from the council as to whether or not you would like to adopt this policy now or wait until our next meeting in theoretically August that we were going to discuss the survey to actually adopt this policy. So I would welcome thoughts from the members. Well, don't jump all in at once. Thanks, Steve.
I guess I would like additional time to both to digest it and to have a discussion about it. But I don't know, Todd, how much of a bind that puts you in terms of responding to requests.
No, well, I will say, let me say a few things, I guess. One, this policy was approved as to form in a previous meeting, so there is no derivation from that. But of course, that happened in the past and we only discussed it. You didn't see it in writing. 2, any requests we get, we follow the law. We endeavor not to charge. There's nothing in this policy that differs from what a response would look like without a policy, but I understand if people want to take time and review it anyway. It won't hinder us responding to any public records requests that come in the interim.
Kind of like what like what Steve said in the comments in the chat, I support bringing it back in August.
Fair enough. Then that's what we will do. Todd, if you would mind including in our August meeting a formal adoption of the policy. Great. Okay, good. And then Todd, you were going to give us a brief update on training and mediation, and then we will go to public comment.
Yes, I will fumble until I share my presentation. So one moment. Okay, you should all be seeing it now. If it will actually work. Sorry. Slides. Oops, sorry. Slideshow. Beginning. Okay, and of course, please ask any questions throughout. Starting with requests for assistance. So I put in a new category of numbers. As you can see, overall year on end, starting in our first full year, 2019, going through the end of last year, 2024, requests for assistance to this office have continued on an upward trajectory. As of Friday, when I completed this report, we had already received 140 individual requests for assistance merely for this year. And I wanted to do something new, which was compare those numbers to the same time in previous years. I was actually kind of delighted to see that we had been sufficiently tracking them all the way back through 2019 that I could do that comparison. And just like our overall numbers, but for a dip during the outbreak of the pandemic. And interestingly enough, at this time last year, the numbers for this time of year have also continued to go up. And so we're at we're at 140 so far this year. As a reminder, these are the categories of information that we track when we receive a request for assistance. And it's interesting because much like with the public records request, we don't require those who contact us to identify themselves. It inevitably happens for the most part anyway. So while we track this information, we don't require people to tell us who they are, any more information than they want to, other than what we need in order to, of course, help them mediate a disputed request. And of course, once you involve a public body, if it has to do with an existing request, we usually end up finding out who the person is anyway. Here are the numbers on the RFAs. So over the course of this year, since January 1st, we've received a total of 42 requests for assistance from state and local government, broken down as you see it here. 14 from individuals who've identified themselves as members of the media, and 84 from the general public. So the general public remains the majority of who is contacting us for assistance. And in response to someone's question, last time I did a presentation, I broke out who the media and general public were contacting us about. And as you can see, for the media, we've been most contacted about disputed public records requests with state agencies. For members of the general public, it's a little more evenly distributed across state agencies, counties, and cities, with, of course, special districts and school districts being in there. And we have a category of other or unknown entities. Those are individuals who have, for instance, called and left us messages or emailed us without initially identifying the public body they were seeking assistance with, and then simply never followed up with us so that we were able to learn who they were seeking records from, or in fact didn't want to tell us and were asking more generalized questions, which does happen. Out of those 140 public RFAs through Friday, 136 of them are closed. 8 of them were closed because the requester, whether it was a public body or member of the public, became non-responsive and didn't get back to us within 30 days. Although, of course, if they ever reached back out to us after that, we would continue assisting them. Otherwise, 103 of them were resolved within 7 days. And the reason that figure is there is that another KPM, key performance measure, that our office has is that for 2026, we complete all RFAs within 7 days. And I'm tracking these numbers to see how likely that is. And so we're doing okay, but obviously we're not at 100% completion of all RFAs for this year within 7 days. And we currently have 4 open. And the last slide, unless anyone has any questions, is about trainings conducted so far. Rather, I've expanded this category, as you might recall, to include Q&As, interviews, and presentations as well, because the office is doing more than just training nowadays. We've done 9 total since the year started, with state agencies being our biggest customer so far. And after another request from a council member, we were doing a better job of tracking how many people are actually attending these trainings, because I'm usually so focused on giving them that I forget to count, but I'm actually making an effort to do so this year. So we've reached, a good amount of people, and I definitely believe this is more trainings than we conducted last year. And obviously there's one upcoming, and there's more in the works, but they're still too speculative to include on this list because we don't really have any set dates for them as of yet. I can hold there. I could go back to other information, and certainly if anyone has any questions, please let me know.
Are there any questions for Todd? Well, Todd,
and of course, this is up on the website if you wanted to go back and take a look at it.
Great. Well, Todd, thank you for the presentation. Glad to see that your services are in demand, and that you're getting through most of it in pretty quick order. So good work, and thank you for that. Are there any questions for Todd? Not seeing any. So before we go to public comment, I did just want to make an announcement that I did share with Shasta and Todd previously. I figure this is probably the appropriate time. I have served now for 2 terms as the chair of the PRAC, and it's time for somebody else to take the reins. I've enjoyed doing this and will continue to enjoy doing it until December, but I believe that's when my term as the chair concludes. And despite the fact that I have been elected twice against my own self-interest and having taken it, this time I'm just not going to make myself available for nomination. So the reason being is, again, I've served 2 terms. I think it's time for somebody else to lead this body. I've done, I think, at least to the best of my abilities, but I also feel that I've not really succeeded in some areas. So, for example, it took us this long to get bylaws into place. There's been a lot of turmoil this office has seen in the past. We haven't gotten a fee bill over the finish line. I actually have taken that a little bit personally because I thought that we could get something past the finish line. I suppose we're still in the race, though. But I do feel strongly that somebody else needs to take over the reins and perhaps improve upon what I've done thus far. And so I just wanted to make this announcement in order to let everybody know on the PRAC that it will be my intention not to seek another term, and in fact would refuse to do so even if you elected me to do so. So I think it's the best thing for this council. I do think that we need new leadership, and wanted to make that announcement to everybody today because we will be electing new officers, I believe, in December, Todd, if my understanding is correct. So having said that, I do want to make time available for the public. And so if you are a member of the public and would like to address the council, please raise your hand at this time. And I guess there's a second page here, so I better look. Doesn't look like anybody wants to address the council. Anything else for the good of the order today, people? Yes, Scott, and then Steve, and then Shasta. Sorry. Wow, lots of hands. Okay, Scott.
Real quick, thank you for your service, Mark. I appreciate that, and I wholly respect your decision there. Speaking of membership, and forgive me if you mentioned this earlier, Todd, but we do have 2 vacancies. Where are we in filling those? Do we know process?
I've been told by both bodies that would be in charge of filling those positions, which is the Oregon Attorney General and the Governor's Office, quote, "We are working on it." That is the extent of the information I have for either position.
Okay, thank you.
Steve.
Yeah, thanks. I think the last agenda item was to talk about next meeting's agenda, and I'd like to request that we include a discussion of council email addresses, state email addresses for council members. I believe we agreed a year ago or more that we were going to move in that direction, but it was not practical at that time, and maybe it would be possible to get not simply an update from DAS, but actually maybe, a recommendation on how to proceed.
Yeah, Steve, that is a long-standing issue that I acknowledge. I do agree with you that we had agreed previously to get that process into place, and I recognize that we still have not done so. This is another example of your leaders failing. So I would, if we could, Todd, maybe add that to the August agenda, if that's at all possible. Maybe that'll be my last success story. Go ahead. Was that it, Steve? Great. Okay. Thank you for that. And then Shasta, thank you.
Yeah, also just wanted to echo thanks for your leadership and totally understand that it's a lot of work. there was something you said in that speech about, the horse race. So what do you think about the chances of 1077 getting out of this session?
Okay, so now you're asking me to look into my foggy crystal ball.
Yes.
And I will confess
You
it
have
is
so much more
I will-
legislative experience.
Yeah, it is foggy. I will tell you, Shasta, my instinct is that they're probably not going to move it this session just because we are now into June. It's certainly not impossible to get this thing through the process. But I do think that because they have taken this up so late, it's a steep hill to climb. Furthermore, it will likely depend on how the hearing goes and whether or not all those questions that I had raised earlier can be adequately addressed. I mean, if it does have a fiscal impact to the state, I think it's going to be a real long shot simply because the revenue forecast is really limiting the legislature's ability to enact new sort of programs, if you will, that will have ongoing fiscal impacts to the budget. So I do think it's a steep hill to climb, but I've seen stranger things happen on many occasions. So stay tuned. It's just foggy, but if I were a betting man, I probably wouldn't bet my next mortgage payment on its passage. At least at this time.
All right. Thank you. I have
And
another
then-
meeting to get to.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry,
And just the last item, as Steve pointed out, we will have a meeting in August to address the policy, the survey, and I think there was one other item that escapes my mind. We'll build that a little bit more. It won't be a long meeting like this one was. I suspect it won't take more than an hour. So we'll, between Shasta, Todd, and myself, we'll probably get a doodle poll out to find a time that works for everybody. With that, we are now 7 minutes over time. Thank you, everybody, for attending today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you.